In this video, we're going to install and I'll give you my initial impressions on the Torklift GlowStep Revolution. A little while ago, I wrote an article on the Weekend RV Adventures blog comparing 3 of what I think are the best aftermarket RV steps out there. One was the GlowStep Revolution. I also reviewed the Step Above and the Steady Step. Now all 3 of those have advantages and disadvantages, and if you want to check out the full article, click the link in the video description below and you can check that out. In the end, I decided that I like the GlowStep Revolution the best. Shortly after publishing that article, Torklift reached out to me and asked me if I'd like to install a pair and do a full review on those steps. So that's what I'm going to do now. And thank you to Torklift for sending out this pair of steps for me to review. This is the Weekend RV Adventures YouTube channel, and on this channel I share some of the adventures we go on, some RV tips, and product reviews and installation videos like this one. So if you like what you see, click subscribe and click the bell icon to be notified anytime I post a new video. I'm going to get started with unboxing the steps, and then we'll move on to removing the old steps. These steps have been sitting here for a while. Torklift sent them out to me over the winter, and I've been anxious to get started on installing them and test them out. So let's go ahead and open the box. We'll check out the instructions and then see what it's going to take to remove the old steps. So I took a look at the instructions, and the first step says remove the existing steps. So not much information on how to do that. I guess it depends on what kind of steps you have and what camper you have. But I took a look at it, and there's 4 large carriage bolts at the top that hold it on, and then 2 smaller sheet metal screws in the back holding my steps on. Unfortunately, I can't get to the nuts without removing the panels underneath. So I'm going to get started by removing the trim panels that wrap around the sides of the camper, and hopefully I can just pull back a couple of those screws and bend it out of the way to reach up in there and get to those nuts on the back side of the carriage bolts. Well, even after loosening up those panels on the sides of the steps, it was still tough to get in there. I had to reach up there with just an open end wrench because I couldn't even fit my ratchet up. There was a plastic trim piece. It was hard to get a picture of, but I'll try and show you what I'm talking about. But I could get in there with an open end wrench, and that was about it. So I got those 2 bolts out. I took the 2 out with the impact that go in the back. And now I'm just setting up a jack underneath the steps to try and pop it up and pull all the bolts out so I can lower it out of the way. Well, the factory steps are out, and I just took a look at the instructions. The first thing to do is measure for the mounting height. Now, the optimal height of the A8004 steps that I have is 35¼ inches to the top of the frame. The height of my camper is only 33½ inches to the top. So I'm just going to be mounting the steps up as high as possible. Now, if your steps or your camper sat a little higher, you may not be mounting them up all the way. You may mount them a little lower to try and get as close to that 35¼ dimension as possible, or whatever the appropriate dimension is for your model of steps. Now that I've got that determined, there's 2 options. There's a 2-man installation and a 1-man installation. I'm going with the 1-man installation, so what you do there is you'll remove the steps from the frame, and that'll make it lighter and easier to mount in place. If you were doing it with 2 people, you can leave the steps attached, and one person will support the steps while the other person bolts it up. So let's go get those steps detached from the frame, and then we'll get them mounted on the camper. Now that the steps have been removed from the frame, I'll take the frame over, we'll test fit it, line everything up, bolt it in place, and then reattach the steps. Alright, well the installation's complete. They bolted up pretty easy. All the brackets lined right up with the factory holes from the old steps I took out. The steps reattached to the frame with no problems. I was able to get in there with a ratchet to tighten them down on the one side, so that made putting them in a little easier than taking the factory steps out. And I also used the carriage bolts that came with the factory steps. That way I didn't have to hold a wrench on the other side of the hex bolts that came with the GlowSteps. If you see the steps behind me, they're a little crooked. That's because my camper height was below the optimal height and the stairs are in the middle position. The GlowSteps have 3 positions where you can adjust the top step, a low, mid, and high. And they say the mid position is the correct position on level ground if you're at the optimal height. Since I'm on level ground and below the optimal height, I'm going to move them up to the high position. That might give me a little less flexibility on uneven campsites, but I think overall it should work out just fine. Well, that wrapped up the installation of the steps. The installation went well. I've tested them opening and closing the steps. They come out and go back in, lock in place all correctly. So I think we're good to go. They are a little tight, and there's instructions in the manual for how to adjust the tension on the steps to loosen them up. But I have a feeling that over time they will loosen up a little on their own, so I'm just going to leave them where they're at and know that I can always go back and make an adjustment later if I need to. We're going to go camping next weekend for 4th of July, so we'll test the steps out. And I think I'm going to not wrap this video up until we get to the campsite. That way you can see them at a campsite on some uneven ground, and I can give you my opinions of them once we get them set up there and use them for a day or so. So I'll see you at the campsite. Again, thanks for watching. Remember to check out the description for any of the links to the steps or anything else, or the blog post, anything else I mentioned. And remember to subscribe. So I'll see you when I get to the campsite, and we'll take a look at what I think of the steps there. I'm here at camp, and we've been using the GlowSteps for a couple days now, and everyone seems to like them better than the factory steps. Melina's had a couple issues with them. The first time she pulled them out, they didn't lock into place when we were getting ready to leave at home, and they kind of dropped down on her to the next notch where the height adjustment is. But I guess that's just kind of getting used to how they work. You know, once you lock them in and put the pin in place, they're rock solid, they don't move, so you just have to keep that in mind. Other than that, they've been great. They're a lot more stable. They don't bounce when you're going in and out. They're an easier step up in and out. I think our dog gets in and out of them easier than the old steps. So overall, I'd say we're really happy with them. When you're inside the camper, you don't feel the bouncing as much either when someone's coming in and out, because you've got those feet on the ground. But it looks like there's plenty of adjustment. We've got a cement pad here, so no issues, but if we're on uneven ground, it looks like there's plenty of adjustment on the feet to level them out. So overall, I'm pretty pleased with them. So I'd also like to do a little recap on the installation of the steps. The installation went pretty good. The hardest part was probably getting the bolts loose from the existing steps and getting access to them. Other than that, the installation went pretty smooth. It took a little over an hour. I'd say an hour to an hour and a half is probably a good time frame to plan if you're going to do this install yourself. And other than that, it went pretty simple. With one person taking the steps apart and mounting the frame part first, and then attaching the steps later, went pretty easy. If you had 2 people, I'd say that leaving them together would probably make it a little faster and wouldn't be too hard either. So overall, the installation was pretty good, and we're pretty happy with the steps. So we just got home and finished unpacking the camper, and there is one other thing I noticed about the GlowSteps I wanted to tell you about, and that is they seem to look dirtier. I don't know if it's the color, being the shiny aluminum instead of black, or if it's the way the tread's designed, but it does seem to hold dirt in it a little more. I don't think I ever cleaned my old black steel steps, other than maybe once or twice when they were really muddy. But these steps looked a little dirty, so I hit them with a little brush and sprayed some water on them, and they cleaned right up. But something to keep in mind. It may not be a big deal to you. Maybe you do care if they look clean or look dirty, but just something else I wanted to add to the review. Again, if you'd like to check them out, I'll put a link in the description of the video, and go check that out. And if you want to check out that full review I did of the GlowSteps versus some of the other aftermarket steps out there, I'll also have a link to that. So thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and we'll see you again.